Last time, I went over the process of creating a disco graveyard, but I didn't cover what would actually live there, as there's quite a bit to go over when designing creatures for a place like this. Like, what sort of real-life animals could be used for inspiration, and how would creatures in this place actually survive and function? And probably the most important question, how good are they actually at dancing? Alright, so when first trying to figure out what something should look like, I always like to look at real life examples. Even if what your design is far from realistic and ends up using pretty much nothing from what it was inspired from, it can be a good starting point. So, what should be a starting inspiration for something like this? I mean, there's not exactly any animals that are good at disco, or being dead. Well, actually, maybe there is. Not the disco part, but opossums are probably the best animal at playing dead. And if there's any animal that's the closest to death, it would probably be the opossum. I feel like I've seen a lot of opossum characters related to death too, which again is probably because they're just really good at playing dead. So that was one creature I had in mind when starting out on the design process. Also, I just want to clear up something about the whole possum-opossum thing. So, this is an opossum. They're the ones with the white faces, and they're exclusive to North and South America, whereas possums, these ones, can be found in a lot of places like Australia, New Zealand, or China. But the most important difference about these two, or at least from this video, is that possums do not play dead. Only opossums are into all that death-faking business. Another thing I considered were crows, as they seem to always be depicted around cemeteries and graveyards. But crows are daytime birds, and all the creatures here need to be for the night, so they didn't really fit. But what about bats? They're kind of like the nighttime version of a crow. Bats are really the only other real-life animal I could think of as a reference, but they actually fit quite well with the disco graveyard theme for multiple reasons. First of all, bats are pretty darn good at hearing stuff. Actually, they have the best hearing out of any mammal, and are good at hearing low frequencies to frequencies way above anything a human could detect. So, having them be related to music works quite well. So of course, taking at least some inspiration from a bat would be a good idea. Though after that, I couldn't really think of any other real-life animals that would fit in well, so I began looking into the more fictional ones, such as zombies, which of course are always a good fit with graveyards. The only problem with zombies is that they're dead. The only way they're actually walking around in the first place is from the infection that's controlling them. Zombies aren't an actual species, and I want the thing I'm creating here to be alive, at least somewhat, so zombies don't really work. Though perhaps there's a way to add a bit of that zombie look by having some of their organs or bones being visible. Also, another thing I got inspiration from were gargoyles. These fellows fit quite well into graveyards, and the idea of there being a creature that's stone during the day but comes alive at night is always a fun idea. So it'd be really good to add that in some sort of way. And as for the disco side of things, there should really be some dancers, along with a DJ or at least someone to control the music. I mean, a disco without a DJ wouldn't be a real disco. That's just some sort of slightly advanced birthday party at that point. Anyways, let's get on with the actual design process. Alright, so for the first one, I experimented with a lot of different eyes, faces, and body shapes before slowly finding exactly what worked and what didn't. So let's start with the head, as that's probably one of the more important elements. Alright, so if you watched the first part, the process of creating the disco graveyard, then you may remember the tombstone designs. Well, I wanted to make sure that these guys' heads look similar to that, so it'd be hard to spot them amongst the gravestones. Pretty much everything in nature has some type of camouflage, whether it's being brown and green to blend in with a forest, or straight up just being a leaf. Pretty much everything in nature either has some type of camouflage, or if it's not trying to hide, then it's poisonous or venomous. Things in nature will just naturally evolve to blend into their surroundings. So it's important when designing any creature or animal to make sure that they kind of match their environment, even if that environment is as weird as a disco graveyard. I mean, nature's done weirder things. there's plenty of real life animals that look literally just like leaves or sticks or things. So the idea of there being a creature that has a head shape that's similar to a tombstone, which also happens to be a bit music related, is not an impossible idea. Though, it does imply that there may be something that even these guys have to hide from, which is an interesting idea. Alright, but that was just the basic disco dancer, who I'd imagine would just be the most common type of nightlife here. So, now for another type of creature. These guys, unlike the first guys, have boomboxes, so they would be in a bit more control. They also have these worm things, and they're probably pretty linked to the boomboxes. Whatever the boombox does, the worms do too. So don't touch the boombox. Also, you might have noticed that in the first design, but I imagine that microphone on their heads would kind of act as like an antenna, picking up signals sent from the top authority in this place, who we will get to in a bit. Also, I took some inspiration from the opossums for the face design of these guys, kind of just in the ear positioning and in having the face just being lighter than the rest of the body. It isn't much, and I would have kind of liked to make them look more opossum-like, but maybe next time. I do have a tendency to come back to things and improve them a year or two later, so maybe next year I'll redesign this a bit, and to make them a little more opossum-like. Alright, now on to the third design, and the inspiration for this guy is a bit more obvious. It's a mix of bats and gargoyles. Imagine this guy would have a lot higher authority than the rest, and would be able to control the volume of any area in the graveyard. He's also one of the few creatures here that you would be able to spot in the daytime. Well, in his statue form, of course. I don't think he'd move in the daytime, but you could see him as a statue. As for some other general stuff about all these guys' designs, I imagine you'd be able to see their bones a bit, which would help make them look a little bit like zombies. Though, that's only because their skin is slightly transparent, and not because their guts are actually hanging out or anything. And I mean, transparent skin is not an unrealistic thing or anything. Many creatures do have transparent skin, especially creatures in dark areas like deep underwater, or anything that lives in a cave. And I mean, even the whole glowing part is not completely made up. I mean, bioluminescence is a thing. Just look at fireflies. Though, to light up to this degree, and to change colors, yeah, I don't know if nature is quite there yet, but it's possible, maybe. Okay, but now we're on to the big one, the Discomancer. This would probably be the top authority in this place, and would be fully in control of the music, which, as you can probably tell, has a lot of importance in this place. The more you can control the music, the more power you have, and anyone who dare attempts to make music without permission is in deep trouble. Unless, of course, your music is actually really, really good, in which case you might be the one with the power. Though I don't recommend trying to do that. And as for inspirations for this guy, it was mainly just a disco ball. And what does a disco ball do? It reflects light in a crazy and trippy pattern. So this guy, in turn, is really just a crazy, trippy mess of things. There's not really any animal it's based off of, it's just a bit crazy. I also imagine his head, like a disco ball, would be spinning, which I can't imagine be very pleasant, but he is a Discomancer, so it probably doesn't bother him too much. Also, another bit of inspiration I took from zombies was the idea of them emerging from the ground. I imagine these guys would come up from the ground each night, and they'd probably spend their daytime hours underground. Anyways, that's gonna do it for the characters, and with that, that's all the things I've made for the Disco Graveyard. Also, I kind of wish I planned this a little better and got this posted around Halloween, as now I'm also going to need to do something separately for that. But, oh well, I'll think of something. Maybe something to do with scarecrows. I'll see. And as for what the next theme will be, I'm not entirely sure yet, but it might have something to do with dreams.